Good afternoon, CFI families. I am back with another video to add to our video series on writing workshop and specifically focusing on strategies and techniques for writing historical fiction. And in today's videos episode, I'm going to be talking about what we've been learning about in relationship to writing strong narrative leads and what I'm asking the kids to do as writers today as an extension of what we've been doing in class today. So, as I always do, I'm going to give a frame of reference with the story that I'm writing or the topic that I'm writing, and the story idea that I have created as inspiration from that event. And then I'll kind of take you through the process that I'm asking the kids to do as well. So, just to kind of return to what we've done previously, I know that I've created a video about creating a flash draft introduction, and the kids had to create or write what their story idea was. And just to remind you, my topic or my event was the Tulsa Race Massacre. And in my story that was inspired by that, a teenage girl and her younger brother escape their home and run toward the hospital where their parents are, only to find the hospital is burning down. But what I'm really trying to show through the characters is kids can act in a courageous manner even when they're facing a devastating loss. Now, from there, what we've done is also we created a timeline just to kind of summarize our story across 5 events. That kind of gives us a way to kind of box in our story, and so that we have a vision for how it's going to start and progress across the beginning, middle, and then of course how it will end. So we have to think about that. And this timeline should also be in the writer's notebook because we've done this already before. Today we're going to be focusing on the introduction or the first scene of our story in order to be able to create powerful or strong and powerful narrative leads, so that we can see how authors think about writing or starting their stories off in a way that's going to hook the reader. So the storyboard that your son or daughter, we started talking about this last week. This is serves as a graphic organizer to sort of capture in a visual way the scenes of our story. And so because we are writing it across 5 scenes that we're going to flush out and grow, the storyboard is going to be the same thing, just like what animators use or people who produce movies or TV shows. And so basically they have a sketch of the main thing happening in that scene, and then the caption should match this part. And this is what they were working on yesterday. And so in my first scene, this is the only thing that I need to use to help me produce a strong narrative lead here. And so in my first scene, the girl wakes up to screams and smoke, and she remembers that her mom went to get her dad from the hospital, and there's a visual part of that. And so I'm thinking about this scene and how it this is the main thing happening in it because it's the beginning of my story, and I'm going to use this information or frame of reference for when writing the different types of leads that we have, and I'm going to go through those. Okay, so they have this template that they brought home with them, and it just kind of explains what we did today, or reminds of what we did today, that writers start their stories to hook the reader in with leads. And so it just reviews the different types of leads that we have, describes what they are, gives them kind of a boring way to start it off, but a stronger lead. And Ms. Buckley did a great job today of choosing the topic COVID-19 as hers, and just kind of demonstrated different types of leads that she can use to make stronger, or revise to make them stronger. And then we as a class talked about why they were powerful. And so the first one was an action lead, which you are making the reader want to know what happens next by creating instant excitement or urgency, making them visualize what it is that's happening. So the description is that it starts with an exciting event that grabs the reader's attention. And here are some examples. I slammed my laptop shut and tossed my backpack in the corner, not knowing it would sit there for months. Now, I won't read all of hers, but I will show you what mine is, and I didn't write a boring one. I'm going to show you how I use an action lead to help them visualize what's actually happening in that moment. So remember, the only thing I'm considering is scene one. I know she's waking up to screams and smoke. She remembers mom to get dad from the hospital. So I'm thinking about that and what can I do to show action happening in that scene at the very beginning. It's the first sentence that the reader is going to read. So I wrote, I threw back the covers and stumbled toward the window, choking on what seemed like a cloud of smoke. My heart pounded harder with every step. So what I want the reader to do is visualize like what was happening. I want them to see that in their mind, and just instead of telling them, I want to show them. So I'm using some descriptive words and some actions that they can actually see as well. All right, and so that's the action lead. We're going to go next to demonstrate a different one. All right, so the next one is the sound lead, and we also know this one to be onomatopoeia. And so the writer, and in this particular lead, the sound that the writer uses can get the reader's attention right away and bring them right into the key event or the action that's happening in there. And so this one grabs the reader's attention immediately and pulls them into the scene by using their senses, or their sense of hearing in this case. So they're imagining that sound. So again, because I'm thinking about this scene, I'm thinking about what sounds am I hearing. And I'm not necessarily focusing on what people are saying, but other sounds that might be happening right there in that first scene at the beginning of it. And again, because she's waking up to screams, smoke, and all that stuff like that here, I chose to go with this. And forgive that punctuation mark there. Boom, boom, boom. Gunshots cracked in the distance, yanking me out of my sleep. And typically with this one, the writer will have the sound starting off, and usually they'll follow it with some type of context or explanation as to what the sounds are, because the reader's going to be wondering that, and that's why they're going to want to continue to read. So in the next part of it, in some way, shape, or form, they will kind of show or tell, in this case, where that sound is coming from. Okay? All right, so let's go to dialogue next. So in this one, dialogue, this is really having a character speak or characters talk to each other. And the powerful part about using this type of lead is that it drops the reader into the character's thoughts or a conversation that's happening in the story. And so it makes the reader wonder what they're talking about. And puts them right into the action story. And I kind of had a challenge with this one because in my scene, the character, or the main character, she's asleep, but she wakes up to screams outside and smoke. And so I had to be very particular about who's doing the talking there, because no one else is in the room with her. So I wrote, help, somebody help. And this is coming from the outside, because I had to think, who could possibly be talking? What could they be saying? The screams ripped through the walls of my bedroom, pulling me out of my sleep. So I had to make it fit for this one, because like what's happening, I didn't want it to be something later happening in that scene, but to start right away, she got alerted that something's wrong because she wakes up to people screaming. Okay, so that's how I did that. And then particularly they'll be sure to use quotation marks around whatever part that person's saying, but again, it starts off by using dialogue. Question lead is usually where kids are most comfortable. It is asking the reader a question to get them thinking and wondering, and it's powerful because it pulls the reader right into the character's thoughts, or it makes the reader kind of answer that question in their mind, and it feels like the writer is talking directly to the reader. So that is a very surefire way of hooking the reader, and I kind of have two options that I did with this one. So again, keeping this in mind, this is how it starts off. But it's a question, so it doesn't have to be anybody talking. What if the screams and smells that shook you awake weren't part of a dream at all? So that was one I'm kind of playing around with. And then have you ever had a nightmare that felt so real, only to wake up and find that it's true. So again, giving this reader something to think about, but considering what's happening. She is waking up. She's awakened from her sleep by this stuff happening. So I had to think about that when I came up with my question. So this is one I'm excited about trying because as a writer myself, I don't think anything I've ever written, I've used the technique of using a flashback, even though I know that's a very powerful way of starting a story. And so I'm excited to try this lead on as well. And so with a flashback, just like with movies, they're a very effective way to start as well. It describes an important event from the past that can help the reader make sense of the story, so kind of giving them context. So a blast from the past is a way to think about it. But it helps the reader understand why the present moment matters. So after the writer flashes back and they move forward in the story, then the reader's like, oh, that's what's happening. And of course, it's going to make them wonder. It's building interest before the story starts because they're going to wonder, okay, what made this happen, right? And so it creates immediate emotion or tension even before getting into the heart of the story. It's like getting them riled up. And so for mine, this was tricky for me, right? But because I know she's the one, it's just all about her being awakened by the smoke and the screams and all that stuff. But I'm flashing back. So I'm going back to something that eventually is going to happen in my story. So I said, I could still see Daddy's tired smile when he left for the hospital that afternoon, never imagining how quickly the night would turn against us. And so obviously the reader's going to be wondering, like, okay, what in the world happened to make the night turn against y'all? Like, what? They're going to want to keep reading. So here, just what would be something that would have happened prior to like the climax in the story. And so this is kind of leading up to this, sort of like teasing the reader. So flashback is going to kind of give them just some context of something that has happened in the past. And in the last example, I'm going to talk about using a descriptive lead to pull the reader in. And this is when the reader uses vivid words to describe the setting. So it can be when it's taking place, where it's taking place, or an event happening in a way so that the reader can imagine what's taking place in the story at that moment. So again, it doesn't have to just describe what's happening, but it can also describe the setting to help the reader visualize that. So they're going to picture it or whatever's happening in that moment. Okay, so again, I had to think what's going on, even though I know she's asleep at the moment. I can still be descriptive about the setting, or I can choose to be descriptive about what's happening outside of the room. So I have to make a decision as a writer, and I can have creative license to do that. So I played around with two of those, and so I'll share that. A cloudy haze crept through the cracks of the window frame, carrying with it the screams of neighbors stumbling into the street. So I want to kind of be more descriptive about the setting, but kind of throw in something else I can have the reader visualize, like people just run outside and they're not sure what's going on, right? And the other one, a little longer, I wanted to take it from outside to inside, and so try it out that way. And I was going to start one way, but then I just made a different decision. So the girl lay in her bed, unaware of the night unraveling outside. Her quilt slipped from under her shoulder as she turned, lost in her dreams. Then came a noise, jagged and terrifying, followed by a sour haze of smoke creeping its way into the room. So hopefully with both of these, I was able to write it in a way where you are able, if you were to close your eyes, you could visualize what you're seeing, what you might have been hearing, whichever thing I'm trying to use sensory details to help you imagine. That's what my hope is that you're going to wonder, like, what, or want to read more based on how descriptive I was. So lots of sensory details and adjectives here, or vivid details to help the reader imagine that. So this sheet includes the option for them to write their lead sentences here, which kind of connects back to that, and so it's an immediate place for them to do so. They also have the option to write it in their writer's notebook where they started today. And so for the sound lead, they have that already written in their notebook because we did try that. But if they are writing it in their writer's notebook, then they'll need to make sure they put what type of lead it is. So if it's action lead, they need to write that and then write the sentence after they've kind of reviewed the information. Okay, so that's what's expected. But writing the powerful leads, and then tomorrow we'll work more on flushing out, like how do we expand or flush out or stretch out our scenes so that we can add more details, more action that's taking place in the story, and of course dialogue. And so we'll be able to carry that work forward with the other scenes as well. Okay? All right, I hope this helps. Have a great night.